So just wanted to go through some tips for when you're looking for a development site and how to determine if a site is first of all subdivisible as well as profitable. So one of the most important tools that you can use when determining whether a property is subdivisible is the R codes. And the R codes can be found through the Department of Planning, West Australian Planning Commission. You can actually download those from their site. I basically walk around with a little R code sheet that will tell me what the averages as well as the minimum requirements are in order for you to subdivide. So just looking at the R codes and the R code table, it goes through all the different R codes, which starts at R2 right through to R80. R80 typically being an apartment site and obviously having the highest density and working all the way back down to R2, which has got the lowest density. Predominantly though in Western Australia and in Perth, most properties are R20 to R40. So when we're looking at, for instance, R20, which is the most common R code throughout Western Australia, you'll see that in order to subdivide, you need to have an average of 450 square metres. So that's the first criteria that you need to ensure that you meet. So if you're looking at a duplex, that's 2 lots and they need to both average 450. So that would mean that you need a total of 900 square metres. The next criteria is the minimum. So you need to make sure that you meet that minimum requirement. So with R20, the minimum requirement is 350 square metres. So you can have one block at 350 and the other lot can be, say, 550, as long as it still then complies with the average, which is 450 each. If we look at R25, your average is 350 and the minimum site you can have is 300 square metres. So again, in this scenario, the minimum in order to have a duplex block would be 700 square metres all up, and obviously for a triplex site it would be 3 times 350. On top of the R codes we have a town planning scheme, and a town planning scheme is basically the council or the shire's requirements in order for you to obtain the allocated R codes. So what we generally do if we're looking at a site, the first port of call is the R codes. Make sure that you meet the average as well as the minimum requirements, and then from there we would use intramaps, and most shires throughout Perth have quite in-depth intramaps that's available or just online, and that will enable you to actually go in and to measure to make sure that you comply with, first of all, the averages and the minimums, and then secondly there would be a link to the town planning scheme. So the town planning scheme will then determine exactly what you must do in order to subdivide, and it's really important that you do check out what the town planning scheme says, because for some shires it will require that you demolish a house as opposed to just subdividing. Some will ask that you fix the house up, so you spend money creating a better frontage. Others will ensure that you build a energy efficient home. So it is important that you check what those requirements are. Also, some shires will say that you need to have a minimum access leg to the back. So it's really important that you check those out because they do vary. So once you've determined whether a site can actually be subdivided, the next step is to go to the intramaps and to see if you still meet the average and the minimum requirements. Especially if you're looking at retaining the property, it's really important that you do these measurements and ensure that you do have the right amount of land available. So with this particular site, you can see it's a corner site, and we're looking at retaining the property and then creating 2 new titles, one which we're going to construct a 4x2 house on, and the other one will have a 3x2. So looking at the R codes, this site is actually an R20/25 site. So that means that as long as you comply with the R20, then you can subdivide it. However, there will be conditions with the R25 if that's what you're wanting to go, if you want to subdivide it based on the R25, which in this case we will be. So under R25, if we look at the average, we're looking at an average of 350 square metres and a minimum of 300 square metres. So this site here, as it is a corner site, you can see that we can subdivide it into 3, and we're looking at retaining the house, and then to the left of that we are creating a new lot which is 401 square metres roughly, or 400 square metres roughly. This site will be the one that we put the 4x2 on. Then on the right hand side we are still able to retain the house, and we're creating a new block at 300 square metres. So remembering that under R25, the minimum requirement is 300, and that would mean that we have a block just shy of 450 square metres on which the house will stay on. So how to determine if a property is actually going to be profitable? Because there's one thing being that a property can be subdivisible, but there's no point subdividing a property if you're not going to actually make any money or any equity. So it's really important that you actually do a feasibility to ensure that first you can subdivide it, but secondly, and most importantly, you can actually create either equity or cash flow via the actual subdivision itself. So what we do in SubPro is our own feasibilities, and the most important part of a feasibility is determining what the end sale price is going to be of a property. So we actually work backwards. We work out what the end sale is going to be, and then we take off all the costs associated with getting that property to that finished product. So first thing is end sale, and the way we determine what price we have on the end sale is comparing apples to apples. So we don't generally look past a kilometre radius. We would look in that kilometre and we would find product that is new, that is the same size. So if you're looking at building a 3x2 at the back, we would look for a 3x2, and with the same specs in which you wanted to complete the home. We would then use that sales evidence, so it has to have settled, has to have sold. We use that as an input into our feasibility. So we always start with the end sale first. And if you have an existing property that you're selling, so you're retaining an existing property, again, you need to compare apples to apples. So you need to find sales evidence that shows a similar product in similar condition, similar size, and on a similar size block. So with this example, this is actually a triplex site that we're looking at. So we have an existing property that's being retained on this site, and that existing property is in not the best of condition. It probably could do with a renovation, but based on our feasibility, by the time we were to spend the money on the renovation and then on sell it, it's extra time in the market, and it's also an extra cash injection. So in this instance, our client has decided to sell the property in the condition that it's in, and we feel by doing this it's going to be a quicker sale. So we've done an existing property forecasted sale price at $400,000 based on sales evidence. We then have two new products, and these new products are both going to be builds. One is a 3x2 and the other one will be a 4x2. So based on sales evidence in the area, the 3x2 property, we're anticipating a sale of $570,000, and for a 4x2 we're anticipating a sale of $620,000. So that we then tally all that up to give us our total end sale price. And the total end sale price for this project would be 1.590, so 1,590,000. And then we take off all the costs associated. So the purchase price of the property, and in this case we paid $720,000, so we would need to take that off. We have a buyer's agency fee, which was the 3.3%, so that's $23,760,000. Settlement costs, which is basically in order for you to settle on the property, we've allowed $2,500, and selling fees. So when we're looking at selling a property, obviously you will have an agent who would sell it. We always recommend that you sell your property using an agent. The reason being that they do have a database of buyers or potential buyers. So we allow 2.5%. Obviously that fee is also negotiable. So if you could get it for a lower amount, that would be fantastic, but we've allowed the 2.5%. So that takes it to $25,500 as a sale fee there. Out settlements, $2,000. And interest, we've allowed interest for holding the property as it is, as well as interest on the build component. So, and we've worked it at 4.4%, which is $25,344. We've then also allowed for rent, and rent at $280 per week. So that comes to $14,560. Alterations on existing features. We actually needed to knock down some of the patio, which was $5,000, so we can take $5,000 off. And then you have demo and clearing and site works. We've allowed $20,000 for that. Stamp duty, obviously you need to pay stamp duty when you're purchasing a property. So we've allowed stamp duty plus a transfer fee and registration of $750. So that takes it to $28,685. And then we have the subdivision costs. Now, when you're subdividing, the subdivision costs can vary quite a lot. In this instance though, we're creating 2 new titles, and we have put in an estimate of $56,000 to create those new titles. Build costs, we have $405,000, and that's for both the 3x2 and the 4x2. And then interest on the builds, and we've done that over the 6 months, which is $8,910. So total costs is $1,308,139, and the net profit is $281,861. We like to also work out what the rate of return on the cash is going to be. And I guess it's also really important to know when you're doing your feasibility that we do actually factor in the cash component that's needed, because if you don't have that cash component, then you actually can't take your property purchase to its maximum potential. In other words, you can't actually realise a profit. So it's important that we factor in exactly how much cash is required. In this case, it's $299,639. And then we want to see how well that cash is actually working for you. So the rate of return on cash is 94%. And then if we look at the total rate of return, that's 21.55%. So that's how we work out our feasibilities to determine whether a property is suitable for a purchase and also suitable to subdivide. Generally speaking, if you're building, you want to be aiming around the 20% mark. And if it's just a land subdivision, you'd probably be looking around the 15% return on the project. So I hope that you gain some knowledge and maybe some extra tips on how to subdivide, if that's the tool that you're wanting to use as part of your investment journey. SubPro does offer a range of different services. These include project management of subdivisions, as well as a buyer's agency side in which we help our clients find properties that suit their criteria. If you would like to know more about these services or how you could be in touch with us so that we can help you on your journey, please do visit our website. And there's also many events that we run throughout the year in which you're more than welcome to attend to gain some extra knowledge, insight, as well as network with like-minded people.